So I guess we'll get started again after that lunch break, and we'll start with community services. And Jane, you're on the hot seat.
Thank you. Once again, here we are, and I have some crews behind me. As much as it is my 23rd anniversary today with the town of Port Elgin and Saugeen Shores. So, although I've sat here for a number of years, as senior management starts to take more of a strategic approach in our thinking, there are some items that occur in our operations that, believe it or not, I can't answer. So I brought staff with me today to help through that process. If there's a question you may stump me with, I may look over my shoulder and see if they can assist me. So here we go with community services, and a lot of this is no surprise to you. I think for the most part you have a good appreciation of what we do in community services, which is vast, or in some cases, if it doesn't fall within another department, it falls within community services. A number of facilities that I've outlined to you today, but to put it into more of a specific approach, I can tell you we have 23 year-round facilities that we operate 12 months out of the year, and 29 additional seasonal facilities that we operate as well. I've listed a number of those facilities for your perusal. Recreation and culture under Lisa's direction. Lisa does a tremendous amount of community development with our groups, our stakeholders within the community, training and a lot of communications with them, as well as camps and programs. The collaboration with the tourism team, which is through Chamber and Tourism staff. We work closely with them on a regular basis. And as you heard the other night, our Bike Friendly is becoming foremounted in a lot of the activities that she's been doing. In our parks and green spaces, 27 playgrounds. We have 63 hectares of grass, 183 gardens, and 200 plus cans that we empty out of garbage on a daily basis for the most part. The harbor, you're aware of the harbor, and we'll talk about that as I get into the budget a little bit more. And our waterfront and beaches, the 18 kilometers that we manage as well along our waterfront. Coliseum with the green room and the annex. The complex with the municipal offices included with that. Our tourist camps, which are in hot demand and a long wait list to get into our tourist camps. And the great work that Shanna's also doing with the pool and ensuring that the sustainability of it and the numbers continue to increase, as you heard the other night at council. In our 2007 achievements, I've attempted to kind of consolidate some of them for you. There have been many more, but for the most part, the construction of 2 splash pads, which I think you're all aware of, a successful year in opening up 2 very well-used splash pads in our community. The completion of the harbor fuel system, and that was in cooperation with DFO, with the sheet piling work at the harbor. Great asset, and certainly has improved the harbor operations. Completed the renovation of the final space of the Dr. Earl Medical Health Center. That is now a full facility, fully operational, and we continue to maintain that, and since the renovation has been completed. We have completed the process in becoming a designated bike-friendly community, and are waiting for hopefully the recommendation and approval to move forward with that. We had a large project at Fairy Lake, as you know, and the added component to that was the elimination of the ash trees. We've completed the trail system and amenities, and have started and initiated conversations with complexities of the waterfront. This year with the stewardship program, we were able to be out on the waterfront a tremendous bit more, speaking with residents and stakeholders in regards to the waterfront and the operations down there. The slip usage at the harbor continues to grow, and we had the 40th anniversary of our Coliseum, which we should need to be proud of and pat ourselves on the back for 40 years of sustaining that building. For 2018, we've got some goals that we're looking at as well, with a successful application to becoming a bike-friendly community. We'll continue to update you on the process of that. The continuation of initiating the recommendations of the Recreation Master Plan, as well as the Waterfront Master Plan. And we hope to, by June, be cutting the ribbon on the opening of a new beach house at the waterfront in Port Elgin. We continue to maintain and nurture the partnerships with our key stakeholders, which I can tell you there are many. many different aspects. And we have a draft done of a parks bylaw, which we'll be bringing to council in the new year as well for approval. Our challenges don't tend to deter from our previous challenges. I'll be quite honest with you. They continue to be pressure points for us. And in no particular order, I've listed a few of them for you today. Managing our aging infrastructure, and you certainly see that as when we talk about our capital budgets and what's on capital budgets as far as our infrastructure goes. Continuing to balance waterfront maintenance expectations with ecological concerns, and our limited staff during our shoulder season. And we'll certainly talk about this as we move forward into today's budget. But certainly once our facilities are open, they require 3 full-time staff out of our 7 complement. As I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that budget. And also part of that, we have a considerable amount of reliance on our summer students for our operations, and they have minimal supervision from our staff as they're either operating facilities or doing multiple other tasks. Budget. So with that, I'd like to start with our budget. And we'll begin with community services in administration. Really, I have nothing to add. This budget complements our 7 full-time staff that work out of the office. So I'll open it up for questions. Town facilities. Been a slight increase as identified in the Town Hall auditorium rent for the Bruce County Theatre Group. Also, we've put a line item in here to acknowledge some maintenance work that we'd like to do at Arlington Street Shop. We historically have not had any money in there to do maintenance. And as our condos increase for rates, we really haven't increased a lot of funds to do any work on those condos. And as our doctors move in and out of the condos, we find we're having to go in and do painting and some minor maintenance. Budget reflects that as well.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is on page 111 of 157. There's a couple of lines there that have to do with utilities costs, and we're hearing that there's a 9% increase in budgeted amounts associated with utilities. I'm just curious to know if we could receive a breakdown of utilities costs that go beyond the itemized ones here, so that we would see, because on the libraries there's actually an itemized one there, but there's a number of other municipal facilities that we don't receive individual amounts. I'm just curious what they would be, because we have been trying over periods of time to do upgrades, energy efficient upgrades to try and improve things. So it'd be nice to know if some of that's paying off, or it would be good to know where there are opportunities. And the other part is it's I think appropriate to understand how much it costs to operate individual facilities. So if at all possible, and to me it should be possible, because there should be a separate meter on most buildings. So I would just request if it's possible to get a further breakdown at some point in the future.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Library budget, there really isn't a very minimal change. As you know, we are now into an agreement with Bruce County Library, and that's reflected in the budget as well. Airport budget, a minimal increase of $1,000, and that minimal increase of $1,000 is to offset some of the marketing they'd like to do, as well as their 2 part-time employees that the airport has, which do a commendable job.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just ask again. We don't always see additional information, and I think it's Councillor Mayette. Are you on the airport committee? No. The item here that's the airport tie downs. That number doesn't change, and to me, I think that reflects the actual cost that people are paying to use the airport, whether it's the up and downs or the people who actually have their planes based there. I still feel that there's absolutely no comparison to the people who have boats at the harbor. And, so we're sort of subsidizing a very small number of planes. So I would ask, perhaps through you, Councillor Mayette, that, we get a report that we've had a couple of times. I don't think we got it last year, just about the activity at the airport, to just show where people have come from and, the ups and downs. And I know they had the kids up in the plane, so just to get a little more information, because the price that it costs to have your plane at the airport, and you get storage too, I believe, it's not at all comparable to what people with boats are paying, and in many ways they're similar kinds of things. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Could I just ask that question? Thank you, Mr. Mayor, directly to Councillor Mayette, or perhaps maybe to Director of Community Services. Has there been an increase in 2018 to airport tie-down, to the fee charged for airport tie-downs, and what was that increase?
Not that I'm aware of. There's not been an increase.
Well, I would, if I could, Mr. Mayor, if there hasn't been an increase in 2018, I guess I would just say back that there are increasing costs or continuing costs, inflationary costs to all of these things, and that there ought to be some consideration given by the airport committee to increasing their tie-down fees commensurately, I would say, to what our increases are in the tourist camps and the harbor. I think that's fair, and probably something that should be instituted by the committee, and that would be, certainly I don't think it's something that council should give direction on, but certainly a request back would, I think, be appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so recreation and culture budget, there's really no minimal impact to that as well, and you've heard about the bicycle friendly again. That is identified in the budget.
At the end of that, Jane, the bike-friendly initiatives, the way it was presented the other night, it looked to me to have dollar figures all over it. Paving shoulders on some of our back roads to encourage cyclists to use those roads, and the plan was a three-year plan with an extension to 5 years, and it started next year in 2018. So the bike initiative plan had some substantial things it wanted to get done. So are we not seeing any dollars here, or is it all going to show up in capital?
You won't see infrastructure dollars in this budget. What you'll see in here are some of the minimal low-hanging fruit projects, such as a new mapping system working jointly with the Rail Trail Association, some of those smaller impact ones. There's also a sheet back here that reflects a service level for staffing that is not reflected in this budget as well.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, I wonder if you could just explain what the last line of the Rec and Culture pages on page 118. I'm not able to decipher the interf-CS indirect.
Right, you'll see that in a number of our budgets in community services, and that references the work that the staff do here in the office. So it's really an in-out. It's a transfer to our admin budget.
Vice Stephanie or Hubert.
Just through you, just for confirmation, Jane, when people still on page 118, there's a line there which is 7625. It's donations. When people sponsor skating or swimming, is that what's included there? Because I think we've been doing a very good job at maintaining sponsorships, but also getting more people and more groups to do that. Is that where that fits in here?
No, those are reflected in the budgets where they are allocated to, so those would be Coliseum. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the question of bike-friendly community initiatives, there was a number of initiatives in that report that were police services-related initiatives, and I wonder, is there what is the visioning in terms of financing some of those initiatives? Is there some outlay in the community services budget to like there was things like, I don't know, handing out things to kids and some of that, some pretty low-hanging fruit things I think we could do without too much trouble. I just wonder, is community services thinking about funding those initiatives? And if that's not the case, are you considering very soon coming to police services looking for support in the police services budget to support some of those initiatives?
This budget does not reflect any additional services from the Police Services Board. It's preliminary days, to be quite honest. Police services have been greatly involved with this to date, to where we are now. As you can imagine, staff has only recently received this report, not prior to it being presented to you the other night. So we're still in the process of kind of defining it and determining what would be best, but we recognize with or without this report, there were a number of low-hanging fruits that we needed to activate on, and they're reflected in this budget. So the conversations will continue. And as I said, they've been they've been excellent with the police services, and we've been really impressed with the amount of meetings that they've come out to discuss it. So it's great to see that they see a value in this process as well. And not just police services, all the departments have been part of this.
You then is that anything that may come with a financial impact, like there's some larger things, like for example bicycle officers, which has an impact, would have a real financial impact or could inside the service, would be something that we wouldn't be exploring. We would spend this year exploring them, and then we wouldn't be talking about anything with a financial impact until 2019 at the earliest.
Correct. As you can appreciate, this budget was completed before we had the results of the bike-friendly presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to parks, I've provided you some notes with parks. We're looking at returning the dedicated bench program. We get a tremendous amount of requests for the bench program, but we certainly want to provide it in a manageable way. We've also provided in here, and when we do our service sheets at the back, I'll describe these a little bit more, but there's an environmental control management program to assist with the geese population. And there's also the addition of a tree inventory plan. Our trees have not been inventoried along our parks and within our trails, so that's identified in here as well. And there was a slight increase to overtime by our full-time staff. We continue to work with Saw Green throughout many of our aspects when it comes to trees and our tree inventory, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with them with the tree inventory plan.
Councillor Mike Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CAO, then one more time. Earlier you mentioned, David, that the $90,000 increase due to the minimum wage increase, $2 next year, equals about $90,000. And you said it's in here. Can you just refresh my memory again? Where did you say it's scattered throughout all of the budgets, or was there one $90,000 line item in here somewhere?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely right with your second statement. Is what we've decided to do is not scatter it out throughout the budget. There is a single line item of $90,000. I cut it and I pasted it and I sent it to you, so I know it's there, but I don't remember exactly where it is. And you know where it is? No. So
I just went through again.
It's under administration, so we have kept it under administration.
I looked, but...
So I can find that for you.
Sorry, I know you said it nice, but I just double-checking.
I know it's there because I did cut it and paste it and send it to you.
So it is in there.
It's there. It's consolidated. And just to be clear, once council approves the wage structure, then we'll push it out to all of the appropriate departments.
So through you to Jane. Jane, on line... on page 120, on line 6740, 1100, part-time wages, we budgeted $162,500. Scheduled is, well, the budgeted number here is $162,500 for 2018, so a 0% increase. But the $90,000 could at some point. Well, you said it's under administration, so it won't come under here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we've done for the budgeting purposes is we've consolidated under $90,000. When council affirms the budget and the wage structure,
this will change.
We'll update all of these.
I understand now. So my next question then, Mr. Mayor, through to Jane. Jane, on that line, we budgeted in 2017 $162,500. to October 31st, we spent 138,067. So you're about a $24,000 under expenditure. I'm assuming that our outside help is pretty much done or not?
No, it's not done.
So we still have outside help working in November, December outside that will be charged to this budget?
Yeah, and we typically do. As much as our key months are obviously July and August, our operations continue well into November and December, depending on the weather.
So we still have outside help working for garbage, not so much washrooms, I guess.
Garbage, washrooms.
So that's there's still charges to come into that account.
That's right.
I just maybe make that comment because I was hoping it's nice to be underspent, but I think that if you take a look at our outside services September, October, and I saw some of the pictures that Councilman Oz sent out with the overflowing garbage containers down at the waterfront and other areas, would have been nice to see some of those containers, spend some of these passive park dollars to put staffing out there. And the reason why that would have occurred in October when, it's 80, 85 degrees outside and beaches are so busy and garbage overflows, is the reason why we did not have staff on, as many staff as perhaps we should have. We can't find people because kids are back to school. It's because we don't have enough adult staff on in the fall. Our staff are busy with Plex calls, EMIs, flooding, and so on and so forth. What's the reason in October when we see the containers overflowing? Do we not have enough people? Can you not find people?
It's a little of both. It is difficult to continue to have students in for the month of September and October because they're in school. So typically they'll be working weekends and evenings when we don't have the supervision for them. And even during the day, it's difficult to have supervision for them if they do have a spare and can come in and work with us.
Okay. So
supervision's been an issue across the board for the entire year.
Okay. So that $24,000 under expenditure that we could have spent, it maybe will be spent by year end. That could come out close to that number.
Correct.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I've heard this before where we've had trouble with supervision for students and having trouble kind of carrying over through our shoulder seasons. Have we ever investigated the idea of maybe contracting out some of these services so that we would be able to, maintain continuity across the board? Sometimes when I look through and I see that we get Public Works to do some stuff and then it just seems like we could consolidate it and a little better. Either have Public Works look after all the grass cutting and the outdoor sort of maintenance, while the facilities would be looked after by Community Services, or there might be an opportunity to contract out some of those services, and then we'd have someone else sort of held accountable, and we wouldn't be put under that kind of pressure. Do you think that's something that we could investigate?
I think there's a couple of questions in there you've asked me, but I can tell you, and speaking on behalf of Amanda, Public Works is also in the same position when it comes to grass cutting with lack of staff. But I want to be really clear that this just isn't grass cutting, and there are many things that occur throughout the course of the year. I'll call them scope creeps, that they creep within the scope of our work that may be minimal in impact for the day, but many of those scope creeps have a huge impact to our operations. And what we're finding now is that we're doing more and more of those operations which are taking away from our outdoor staff. So as an example, as I said in my presentation, we now have a full Dr. Earl Medical Health Center that we fully maintain. We are in there changing light bulbs, changing batteries, operations that we never did before. That's one building as an example. We're regularly at the library on a regular basis, changing light bulbs, fixing machinery, doing their HVAC system. So I don't want us to get caught up on just grass cutting, because that's a very small part of our job that we do.
I would tend to agree, which is why I think it'd be something that would be very simple to contract out, which would help up a lot of opportunities for the remainder of your staff.
I just can interject a little bit. Some members of council may know this, but probably not. So the senior staff, we've been looking at the pressures we had over the summer with garbage and over the fall, and we are investigating some technology solutions that are less labor intensive, much less labor intensive, and we anticipate, we had a presentation earlier in the week, we anticipate that will smooth out some of these demands. So we're not picking up garbage every day, we're picking up once a month.
that type of, or once a week, whatever. So I think that'll help smooth out the peaks and valleys and may achieve what you're looking for, Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, my question is about 6740, 4701, the splash pad maintenance. I wonder if you could comment on the considerable difference between, do we still have maintenance costs to come in for this year?
We do, and we still have additional costs as well. It's certainly been a trial and error year for the first year, and I think we're feeling that once we get a full year under our belt, because we opened up halfway through the season for one particular station, and the other one was at the beginning of July. So we just had a good chat about that. We wanted to keep that the same as what we budgeted last year, just to give us a real sense of what are the true operations. We're new to this business. It is, I'll be honest, trial and error in some cases. So until we get a good 12 months under our belt, we'd like to keep it the same, just to make sure that it is, if it is in accordance with what we're seeing and with what other communities are seeing as well.
And do you anticipate that 893 figure is going to go close to 40,000?
No, I don't at this point. But again, we haven't had a full year under our belts. Right. We're still trying to determine the water usage as well, and that's playing a big role in determining what we should be budgeting.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Just in a continuing stream on the splash pad maintenance line, how much of that dollar figure is intended to be contracted out? And I asked that because there were a couple of times that I saw the company who had installed it back, and so I assumed that was part of that process. But there was a different company there at the end of the year that blew out the lines and everything. So is that intended to be part of this, that there will be elements that are contracted out to people who maintain splash pads all over the place?
No. Part of the contract with the installation was that they would come and train staff on how to blow out the lines at the end of the year. So that's what they would have been doing.
Councillor Minaj.
Just one of a general nature, but specific to this page, 121, 157, 5400, the Parks Waterfront Master Plan. Now, it's still there, and I get that. I think I get that. So what is our general view of how often a major plan should have a revision or a review? Is it something we should be doing every 5 years, every 10 years? Like, we know the official plan has like a 5-year window, and transportation plans, updates have 5-year windows. Could we envision that, I believe, if I was on it, I believe we presented that Waterfront Master Plan in 2013, so 2018 would be a 5-year window. So is there an opportunity here that we should consider some sort of revision to the Waterfront Master Plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a couple of answers to that question, Councillor Minaj. And one of them is, if you think back to the strategic plan exercise, I think the last page or near the last page, there was I would describe as a infographic of a planning hierarchy. We're currently working on that and populating it with our current plans, and that hierarchy will start to dictate how often, identify which plans we have, how often they should be updated. And we've spoken at the senior management team in terms of budgeting for these plans. We want to create a cost center or somewhere in administration that we can house all of these plans, and maybe it's $50,000 a year goes into the budget, and year 1 it's this plan, year 2 it's that plan, year 3 it's these plans, but it smooths out the budget and it smooths out staff's workload.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. There's one line in here, what number is it here? It's on page 121. It's 5405, the tree inventory plan. I think the intention when I read the sheet further along was that we're going to try and find a partnership opportunity with a university or some other educational institution that has an interest in this. I would just, as soon as we're able to get on that, having worked in that world for a career, those students get snapped up very early. And there are a couple of universities, University of Toronto is one of them, that they do send students out to do this exact work. And I think I had a conversation with Frank about this last year, but, the deadlines were there and all this kind of stuff. So, because that will be a tremendous asset if we can get somebody to come in and do that for us. Thanks.
Sorry, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Come as no surprise, my question is regards to the $15,000 for the Saugeen Rail Trail Association. We asked for and we were provided with an operating budget for the Rail Trail Association, and who do we have a committee member? Okay, so I'm just looking at the budget. I'm pretty sure you don't have it up in front of you, but there's a couple things they've got in there. For the total operating expenses of $18,000, they have budgeted $5,000 for HST. HST has gone up to 30%. I don't know how they're spending that. They're also budgeting for this year a new item of $3,000 to purchase a lawnmower. Is it customary for the Saugeen Rail Trail Association to start accumulating equipment? We have lawnmowers and we have other equipment that we use to maintain the trail system in town. They've got an ATV now, which is a side-by-side, which we're paying insurance. Expenses, $100 on, insurance of $110. Are these expenses, is anybody else seeing this as being a little over the top? Really what my question is when is the Saugeen Rail Trail Association going to stand on their own? Like the ATV club, like the snowmobile club, that sell membership fees to pay for the expenses that they have. They don't come to town asking for expenditures, and they certainly didn't get a 100% increase like the SRT did a couple of years ago. I just think that personally, I don't think we're putting enough scrutiny on the Saugeen Rail Trail. So my question is, has anybody scrutinized their budget to the point where some of these things have been questioned besides me? Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
I cannot tell you about I can ask about the lawnmower. What I can do is to say, if you look at with regard to HST, the rail trail budgeted $4,500 for HST in 2017, and it ended up spending $5,900. So this year they're budgeting $5,000. So I don't think that this year's projected budget is a jump over the previous year. I guess I'll have to get my calculator out and figure out where that came from, but I'm happy to inquire about it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Harbour, we're looking at a 4% increase to the seasonal and transient sites, slips, and you will see when I present our 5-year capital forecast that there is an opportunity for some new docks on the north side, and we're certainly seeing that they're aging. So
Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you. A number of years ago, we had a harbor business plan. I guess it would be good to imagine some sort of update on that. Just even looking at the document that we have in front of us, you can look back at the 2016 actual, and there was an $85,000, almost $85,000 quote-unquote profit from harbor operations. That now, once again, it's showing up as about a $36,000 quote-unquote profit, which becomes revenue for the town. Back when I started on council, it was about $110,000 or $120,000 a year that we realized from revenue. So perhaps not during this term of council, but I think we're getting close to another opportunity to really assess the harbor as a business enterprise, and make sure that we're providing, if we should be providing that business, but if we are providing that business, that we're doing it in a way that is attractive and saleable. And then beyond that, that it's realizing the percentage profit that would be expected of a business operation, because that's what it is. And the town, it certainly shouldn't cost us money, but at one point we definitely were realizing revenue that we could use for other things, and that number has fluctuated during my 3 terms on council, but it's going back down again, and that's a little bit concerning. So just, kind of put it away for, sometime soon. It's probably a good idea to imagine updating the business plan for the harbor.
Yeah, and if I may, it's really over the last 5-6 years, council has really invested in the harbor in rebuilding the south end of the docks, as well as the fuel system that we did this past year, and the north side as well. So we've done, I'd say, half the job, and there's still a considerable amount to do, and unfortunately that reflects in the budget as well, that maybe didn't about 10 years ago.
Councillor Minaj.
2 things. One, relatively easy, I think. So operationally, we're saying the harbor is at what percentage of full? Where are we? That's my first question.
Okay, as far as a seasonal fees, we're at about 80% capacity right now. Where we are not at capacity, again, I'll make reference to the north side. Those are smaller docks without servicing, and what we're experiencing is our boaters want the larger docks with the full servicing. So in some areas, we just can't give them that.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, I'm not sure if it's waterfront or if it's harbor related, if it's capital or if it's operational, but I thought there was an operational element to it. The pier extensions, if we call them that, what do you call them? The left and right
the breakwaters.
The breakwalls. What? Okay, thank you. The breakwalls. Good answer. They have been fenced off, and my understanding is if we get a report back, it could be a smaller number, like $40,000. Would it be operational money, or would that still be capital money to make repairs, or it's a much larger capital expenditure? Can you explain the difference?
The breakwaters are not owned by the municipality. They are DFOs. So it would be council's decision whether or not they wanted to invest in the breakwalls based on the report that we get back from DFO. So there's 2 ways to look at it. We do nothing. DFO pays the expense. We pay the expense, or there's a partnership. Until we get the results from those from the report, we really have no comment on it right now.
Mayor, thank you. So there's no point in putting a placeholder in, saying that saw the original estimate that was that if it was hours and it was a simple repair, it would be an operational repair. So we should show that number, or it's still a partnership possibility.
If it was if it was under $5,000, it would be in operations. More than that, and if council's wish is to invest money to repair the breakwater, it would be under capital.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just was wondering, with regard to, we have the October 31st actuals for the harbor there and now, and I believe, if I recall correctly, in your presentation at the beginning, you said that slip usage is up this year, and I just wonder if you have some sort of ballpark. Do you think we're going to wind up close to the 2017 budget on revenues, or are we going to do a little bit better in 2017 than we were expecting? And if we are, do you have any idea how much? It looks a bit like we're ahead of. It looks like we're ahead of where we should be in revenues. I'm just guessing.
I'm just taking a quick look too. Our largest expenditures that we have not allocated for yet is our fees to DFO. So that's still outstanding to about $77,000. We're gonna come relatively close. Moving on to waterfront, really the only substantial increase here was for our waste management. We've had 2 tremendous springs with wind storms that have resulted in a tremendous amount of debris on our waterfront. So we've reflected a component to that as well.
Councillor Minaj.
If all comes to fruition and there's a new waterfront beach house washroom facility, will there not be consideration for additional commissioning startup costs? Are those considered operational, or they're all part of the contract, the capital contract to build it and provide it? I mean, the 2 splash pads were built and provided, and then you added maintenance costs immediately on top of in the same budget. So are there expected additional costs on top of that capital expenditure that should be reflected in your operational budget for the beach washroom? Sorry.
All of our operational expenses for our washrooms, whether on the beach or in our parks, falls under our parks budget. So they are reflected there. Moving on to Coliseum, really minimal change there. You will recall this council approved the elimination of the subsidy, and we've reflected that in the budget for both the Coliseum and the plaques.
Councillor Madison.
I don't know if this, sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you, I don't know if this comes under operational capital. Have we found out anything about the floor replacement?
That will be capital.
That's capital, thank you.
Coliseum as well.
Councillor Grace.
This is also a Coliseum question, and it's related to Councillor Matheson's question. With regard to rentals, it doesn't look like the estimated budget for 2018 is changing all that much, but are we anticipating having to close down and not having that facility be available for rentals as much as we ordinarily would? And how might that affect this figure?
If main floor rehabilitation is approved through this budget, the $2,500 that you see in main floor rentals would be zero. And at the Coliseum in the summertime, there is minimal floor rentals for the summertime, and in fact, some of them, I believe, we've given them in kind. So it would not have a huge impact to those. We've already, as well, had conversations with those few bookings that we have had, and they are aware that if approved, we'll do our best to relocate them here or at another
facility.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just jump back to the beach for just a sec? Waterfront, sorry. Two things. Contract services is estimated at $20,000 from $11,000. Does that include beach grooming?
Yeah, beach grooming falls under contract service for $20,000.
Okay, so there's a somewhat expected increase in use there. And the beach vehicle lease, there was nothing in 2016. Is this a pickup truck that we're leasing?
Typically, we do lease a pickup truck, and to be quite honest, when we determine where our fleet is going, it's determined in the spring to where our needs are. So there's a bit of movement amongst all of our divisions and community services between our parks, our beach, our tourist camps as well, and our harbor. So in some cases, we always budget for a vehicle lease in there. We don't always necessarily use it, but it's there in case we need it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So Coliseum, I think we've talked about. Plaques is very similar to Coliseum. Really, no change in that. Tourist camp, we've had the discussion at a previous council meeting during fees and charges of the 5% increase, and I think we'll hold that until we deal with fees and charges at that time.
Yeah, we're going to deal with fees and charges at the end. Councillor Minaj.
I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is a special request for department head to provide a report or it's something that you already have information on, but if we were to eliminate the Lakeview Ballpark and convert it into additional tourist camp spaces, what percentage increase would that be to the Port Elgin tourist camp for, I mean, if we're going to run things like a business and we've got pressure on us to look at a recreational complex and we need to fund it, I would like to know what the expected revenue increase would be over the expected number of increase in number of sites if Lakeview Ballpark was converted. Is that something that you already have information of or can get?
I can get that for you.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Jane again. So, and I think I sent this question in, but I'm not sure it got 100% clarified for me. Talked about utility costs at the Coliseum, Jane, going up $5,000 next year, but the Plex is going up $40,000. Just explain to me again why the big difference.
It'll include this building as well. For the Plex.
I missed that point. Thank you.
And our final budget is pool. Numbers continue to increase, as you heard at Shanna's previous presentation, and that's reflected within the budget. Really no other change at this point.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you, I didn't notice it on the Plex or on the Coliseum, but I was hoping to see it here. I asked earlier about where the sponsorship stuff shows up. So when groups or individuals are sponsoring skating or swimming, and I don't believe it's here either. So I think that it's, and I'm sure it's somewhere else. But I think it's important that we can, wherever we have a chance, to recognize that we're getting involvement from the community, because those are partnerships too. And I'm just, it would be nice to know that we're maintaining the level of sponsorship or in fact improving it. So I just don't see it itemized out here. So I'll just send the question in and get some other information later.
Currently it falls under our rentals, our rental revenue. Now we can easily add another line that identifies what specific amount we're bringing in for those sponsorships.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you. On page 137 of 157, oh, I may be wrong. I was looking at maintenance. Yes, pool building equipment repairs, 4,700. I believe that's at the top of page 137. So, what is the next limiting piece of equipment that would prevent the pool from continuing to operate? Is it this looks like it's general maintenance, small maintenance, other than the tank itself. Like, we've had great discussion on the pool, but I want to go back and I want to ask about the current pool. Like, where are we with the potential for the next piece of equipment to time out or mechanically be at the point where we're driving those expect those maintenance costs to be prohibitive?
In, I think it was 2013 or 14, I brought a report to council to address what those items were, and there were 3 key items on that report: HVAC, the pool liner, and for the life of me, I can't remember the third one. But I recently looked at that report again, and we have checked. We've completed all of those requirements in order to keep the Centennial Pool open and operational. The major item is that it's not accessible. At the end of the day, Centennial Pool is not accessible for all patrons in Saugeen Shores. However, we are confident what we have done mechanically, we can continue to operate. Future capital budget items between now and hopefully a new pool will be minimal in cost, and we will bring those forward, whether they're tot docks or vacuums or whatever the case may be.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess part of that, I think it's $22,000 on $4,700, these ongoing repairs and maintenance. Are we continuing to look at, like, I actually spend a fair bit of time in the pool these days with my kids, and things like the floors and the change rooms and stuff, I mean, they're just coming apart, right? And like things like that, are we continuing to plan to, I don't know if that's going to be operational, if that's going to be capital, that's kind of rubs the line, I guess, a bit, but are those things going to continue to get upgraded just from a health and safety standpoint? Do we have those in the work plans to keep, like, changing things like floors out? Like, it's some money, but it's also something you kind of have to do when you don't have an end date on the building, right? Yeah,
and that's it. That's just it. That's been the challenge when it comes to planning on what you should be replacing and what you shouldn't be replacing, and the lifeline for those. Yes, painting, tiling, anything like that, we will continue to repair. Yeah. High dollar figure items, we certainly question when those come up to, again, how long are we going to be there? So those are some of the challenges that we face throughout this process.
Yeah, and I would say we absolutely need to move forward on things like those floors and stuff. It's just to the point where it's just not safe anymore, right? And if we're going to keep it open at all, we have to do that maintenance. So I would certainly support you in spending the money, whatever money is required to, as long as we're going to have the doors open to keep maintaining those things.
Right, and I remind council that the municipality does not own the lobby area or the stairs or the entrances. We merely own the pool itself. The change rooms are also owned by the school board. So items like that, we negotiate with them. We, in the end, typically end up paying that, but that's how the process goes.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, I apologize if I missed this in your explanation, but the programs like Swim to Survive, life-saving competitions, expense, swim, sport for life, etc., are listed as 0 in 2017 and 18, and but in the actual, it's significant expenses. So how does that?
Yeah, I can explain that. Those historically have been funded through grants, and we've received grants for the past 2 to 3 years on those programs. Therefore, we don't budget those if we don't receive those grants.
Okay, so I think that's pretty well the end of our operating budget. A number of, sorry, go ahead. Sure, go ahead, Councillor Rich.
Sorry, so and just for a moment of clarity, if I wanted, there was an opportunity to talk about service increases and council requests. Is that the end? If I wanted to do anything with regard to community services, that's the time in which to bring that up? Okay. Okay, good enough then. Thank you, sir.
So, thank all the department heads for the work you put into that. I think what we'll do now is there's a number of items there, these where we have service level increases or enhancements, call them what you want, some suggestions. As I understand, these are all of these. Yeah. You want to speak to it? No, I can go ahead. I think what I'm just getting this right. They are what. So the first, we're at item 10 with service level enhancements, and there are a number of them there, but they are included in the budget. I guess the item for discussion is there any of them that you would like to modify or remove? And we'll go down pretty fairly. Okay, just name which one. Maybe we should go through it so that we don't jump all over and we get finished with which one. Is there anybody wants to talk about the compensation review for elected officials? Okay. The next one then is the Strategic Initiative Office, and that's the one you want to speak to? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you, it's probably a question for Jessica if she's still here. Jessica, what is the people plan? What's the idea behind a people plan?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The idea of the people plan really is to have a look at our culture. So do some employee engagement. Have a look at our statistics too. What does our workforce look like? Who are they? What's our retirement figures? Some of that planning around our corporate values as well. So certainly organizational effectiveness and tying that together to ensure that we have a strong workforce and plan for the future.
Okay. Any other questions on strategic initiatives? Customer services rep, part-time to full-time. Costs are included in there, and they're included in the budget for your information. Any questions on that one? Intranet refresh update. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Councillor Minaj.
After a lot of study and some questions and a reply to email and then the detail here, I want to start by saying that I absolutely agree that it's something that we should consider as a municipality. So then I read the details and find out that there are special rules on a Coast Guard Auxiliary that are governed by the federal government, and that it has to be a charitable organization, and they have to meet certain levels of training and accreditation. The ship has to be met with major seaworthiness criteria. Every so often it has to be stripped apart and checked, and I'm at odds here because yes, I think it's a good idea, and me, I'm wondering about the crossover. There's liability insurance for the people who are volunteering to run the ship. I saw a number which floored me, that was some almost $40,000 that local members and others had decided to purchase this particular ship. I call it a small boat or ship. It's a vessel, thank you. It's a fast response vessel, and it has a good history, and $40,000 was a lot of money. So I'm curious, and I'm open to more discussion about all of these things, like the airport, like the Rail Trail Association, like the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and like the Chamber, and all of these subgroups that we want to support, that they want to do well for the community. And this one caught me off guard with just how much it costs to run this unit, and it's called the Saugeen Shores Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary. So who owns it? It looks like we don't own it. The individuals purchased the vessel, and we don't own it. But it's being operated and controlled under the auspices of the municipality, and maybe as a subset of the fire department. And I'm not sure I'm ready yet. I think that I'm okay with the concept. I'm okay with selling the concept. I would like the broader discussion to take place. The email response was amazing, and from Phil, and I just think that it was too much too fast for this budget. Maybe we need to pull this and have another discussion at another time about the whole machinations of how this auxiliary unit will operate.
Do you want to speak to that? I think there's some information there. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the intent of this in a grant is to keep the municipality not in the offshore water rescue business. So at an arm's length of the operation of offshore rescue, as Councillor Minaj has said, it's a very expensive service to offer. To allow a grant, an operational grant to the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary, it's managed federally, and it protects some liabilities of the municipality. And what we're suggesting here is that the municipality not be in the offshore water rescue business, that we take part in a very proven national program of the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary through the authority of the Department of National Defence, through the Coast Guard, and that we operate at some distance from the municipality.
Okay, I think the CIO wants to speak to it.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that, and it is somewhat ironic, and we make decisions, and sometimes we make good ones, and sometimes not. We debated whether we should list this as a fire department in the fire department, or whether we should put it into administration, just to keep the separation that this is not under the auspice of the municipality. It's not to connect it to the municipality. It's a separate arm's length registered charity that some of our members participate in it, like some of our members coach hockey, and it is a grant that we felt was worthwhile for the community.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a great proposal, and as a matter of fact, I would have put the grant even a little bit higher as the unit gets its sea legs, so to speak, and comes together. The vessel that Councillor Minaj spoke of is a former Coast Guard auxiliary boat from Lake Erie, and I know this because I had some involvement with an auxiliary unit for many years, did all of their paperwork, and was also privy to a lot of information about some other community units. So you can have an individual unit with the auxiliary, you can also have a community unit. One of the community units that sort of maybe relates to a lot of what we're trying to do here would be Pocamar, which is the Port Colborne unit. You can do a little Google search and see what Pocamar is all up to. This is a great plan, and Phil, the fire chief, had some experience with an auxiliary unit on a private basis here. When that all disbanded, this is great. This is about 3 years of prep to get to this point right here. We should be incredibly supportive of this, and I think as the unit finds its sea legs, it will be much more obvious that it isn't a fire department unit or a fire department adjunct. It's a totally separate thing. $15,000 as seed money or whatever you want to call it, will spin into incredible opportunities for us to build a group of people that will be highly trained and motivated to get out of bed at whatever time, run to a dock, get on a boat, and go out and do what they can do to, in most cases, rescue people. Sometimes they're recovery missions. There's a big difference there. So this is a very good investment for the future of this community. And if we really are in tune with the waterfront, this is something that just makes so much sense here. And I applaud the energy of there's a number of guys mentioned here. It's not all guys. There's a couple women too, but there's a little small core group that they've made this happen. And yeah, they put their own money up initially, but it's now there now. And they had what is called when you get sent out. It's called a tasking. They had a heck of a lot of taskings this year, and we were very fortunate that we didn't have to, have the Coast Guard come down from Tobermory or up from Goderich. The closest community unit is in Kincardine, but they would not service our area. Or alternatively, you got to bring in the stuff from Trenton. So this is incredibly valuable and $15,000 well spent. Sorry, my dad used to work with the Coast Guard. Just have a little soft spot for this stuff. But I'm so happy to see this on paper like this for us, and we should be incredibly supportive.
So there's no any questions about removing it? Ask a question. Go ahead.
I just think I would just make a suggestion. I guess that we leave it in the budget, but request, like, there seems to be some people in the room who know a lot about the Coast Guard service and what it does in this program, and others like me who know a little less about what's going on this. I would just ask we leave this in the budget, and then at some point we get a report to council to say what this is, how much money it costs, all the things to tell us a bit more about it, so we all are on the same page.
I think that's fair, and you can probably do that for us, Phil. Thanks. Sometime in the future. Thank you. So we move on to the next item, which is a full-time bylaw officer from part-time for an increase of 3 hours. Councillor Dave Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this the same individual that we have now? He's just going to up his hours?
Yep.
Okay, and he's willing to do that? And eager? Okay, good.
No objection. It stays in the Developers Forum. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to it, but I think this has been an excellent tool that we've developed here in the town to help us along with our economic development. No objection, then it stays in. Planning policy updates. So I think we had a pretty good discussion on that earlier and an explanation of it from Bart, but okay. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, and it was sort of focused around the OP review, but you read the explanation on this page, it's a little broader, or maybe a little broader than that. It's sort of vague. I guess I just wanted some clarity. Is it entirely intended to be, or largely focused on the OP review, or your anticipation is you're going to need some other resources? And I guess that one of the reasons I ask is if what is left or what is in there beyond the OP review is uncommitted, if you're budgeting it for potential projects that you don't know will exist, does that mean that there will be room? Are you budgeting money here for ideas that may pop up over the course of the year? I guess I'm saying things that we might want to look at. Is that a fair characterization of what's in here? Because I got lots of good ideas, so I can spend some of that money.
I just wanted to say, planning rarely gets you clarity. I can assure you, planning rarely gets you clarity. So that stays. The next item is crack and seal road program. Any objections to that staying? None. Environmental control management. Any objections to that staying or removing? Councillor Minaj.
Well, I've done some research and, of course, taken many photographs and talked to the Berta groups and witnessed a woman being attacked by a goose on our boardwalk. Wasn't very pleasant for her, or the goose, I think, was very agitated. So the numbers are exponentially rising. So we might have had 50 10 years ago or 5 years ago. We're into thousands now, and it'll be tens of thousands in another 2 to 3 years. This is no longer, this is becoming unmanageable. So my concept here is that is $15,000 enough? And of course I support Diane's passionate and eloquent view on the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Who doesn't want to support that? This is completely different. But with feral cats and too many geese, you'd think we could solve this problem mutually. But anyway, the idea here is that I would want to know that we believe we can control this. It's become a problem. It's becoming a problem. It's open season in New Zealand. They're allowed to kill as many as they want. They're absolutely furious with us. It's not here to. Absolutely not. There is a hunting season, but we've got to go through policy and procedure to take care of this. But is $15,000 enough to tackle a 15,000 goose population that could occur in the next 2 to 3 years?
I'll speak to that, Councillor, and Jane can certainly add that. This is a first year beginning. Certainly, I think we've said here that we'll be evaluating it in year 2. I expect in next year we'll be coming with a more significant budget increase for this. There are things that we want to start and get moving, and we can learn from other communities in terms of the effectiveness. But this specifically is for plantings, which is the most single effective way to create a habitat that the geese don't want to come to. So this is a beginning. We'll reevaluate it, and next year we're anticipating the number will be larger.
Okay. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the planting, Jane, I think, might be able to answer this, and the question is about the areas that are grassy, because that attracts geese. How much flexibility do we have in terms of that land, which is, I think, granted to us, right? In terms of using a different kind of putting in shrubs and things, is that something we could do?
Certainly, that's our intention, to do that in that area. We're always cognizant of our neighbors as well across the sight lines that they've had over the years, but I'm sure they're not appreciating the geese. Around the harbor has been our biggest issue, and is because of that, because of the grass that is there, and it is impacting those that want to use the trail or not using the trail. That's certainly our hot spot, and that will be our focus. And I think it's important to note that plantings are not immediately many geese in that area. It's going to take years of growth, but at least we need to get started on this. We've tried to manage it in our existing budget until now. We realize that there is an impact.
Vice Stephanie Huber, then over there.
Thank you, and I just wanted to follow along. If we're just imagining that we're going to discourage them from going to a certain area, they're just going to go somewhere else. I'm just, I'm curious to know, can we at least explore other methods of somehow reducing the impact of geese? And maybe it's not this year, but because, you shift them away from the harbor, they're here. They're going to end up, maybe they'll end up on Luke's Field, maybe they'll end up at GC Houston's playground, but we're just going to shift the problem around. So I would hope that we would be thinking about other solutions too that can work with this.
The funding will also look at other solutions.
Councillor Dave Mayap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is not well spent money. I think you're not going to solve the problem. I know a little bit about geese. I know how to speak their language sometimes when I'm trying to lure them in, and I was out shooting them a couple of days ago, as many as I could, Neil, for your benefit. And but what I'll tell you is the problem at the harbor is they've lost their fear of humans. They don't see humans as a predator in the harbor, and the only way to correct that is, unfortunately, it's a cruel solution, but it needs to be done. The other problem that we're going to have this year that we didn't have before is we've created a human-free habitat for them by putting a fence at the end of the breakwalls. Those two breakwalls are going to be covered with geese, and nobody can go out there to shoo them away. It used to be people would walk their dogs out there, and the geese would have to go somewhere else, otherwise they're going to encounter a dog or a human. Well, guess what? They've got that all to themselves now. So this problem is, like Neil says, it's going to get worse, and we've created a situation that is going to exacerbate it. And no matter how many shrubs and junipers and cedars you plant, they're not going away. There's only one way to do it.
Okay, thanks. We've had lots of talk about goose here. So is anybody object to leaving this money in? If not, then it's in. You're objecting? All in favor of leaving it in then? So it's left in. So then the next item is parks, tree inventory and management. So there's $10,000 there. Any objection to that? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I don't object to the expenditure or to the activity. I just what I wonder about is how it's financed. If it needs to be financed through tax levy, my understanding is a one-time expenditure. It's an inventory of trees. Once we do it, where it's done, couldn't we fund it from the tax stabilization reserve or some reserve in 1 year? I think that we're looking at a few other things coming up in the next couple of minutes here, where I think council's going to want us. I think council's going to be tempted to spend more money, and I think this might be an opportunity to take 10 grand off the tax levy and fund through tax stabilization.
Yeah, I agree. If you wish to take it, we'll leave that with staff to come back with a recommendation of some other fund. That Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
In the event that this is successful and it stays in, is it possible to maybe consider pre-budget approval so that at least an outreach can be made to the institutions that have these kinds of programs? Because I'm concerned that perhaps the $8,000 isn't going to cover what would be expected from that end. So that, or even if we just gave permission to just start the connections so that we had a more realistic number, perhaps, because students don't come cheap.
Well, I think the first step is, do we want to leave it in the budget? Okay, and I think we can begin to reach. Okay, one additional one then. Okay, sorry. 3 additional items that staff are proposing that are not in the budget, and we'll deal with them individually. And the first one is a fire training officer with some corporate responsibilities. What's your pleasure? Any questions on it? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I'll just make the statement that I think that first off, it's a recommendation in our fire master plan, which is something we should be implementing, and quite frankly, any expenditure you can make to support the volunteer firefighters is money well spent, because volunteer firefighters are one of our community's top assets, since they are fighting fires at a very low rate and at great benefit to all of us. So I think anything we can do to invest in their training is money we should spend, and I'm in support of this expenditure.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this was presented last year, and I didn't speak in favor of it as far as fire training officer position. I was pleased to see, and I think, if I stand to be corrected, was this title been changed to corporate training officer, or is it still listed as fire training officer? What are we calling this position?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. It is fire training officer, but the position would have a lot of corporate responsibilities. So common training throughout different departments, first aid, fall arrest. We do a lot of corporate training now that we are contracting out, and this position would take that in for some cost savings.
Because I did speak on this last year, and I fully agree with having a training officer as part of staff, particularly in fire. But I also spoke last year about corporate training officer positions where CPR, first aid, confined spaces, DFIP training, all those sorts of trainings corporately, Saugeen Shores wide, there's a need to have a training officer in place, and we need to know if we have assurances. Then, if Phil, what you're saying is that we do have assurances that as a council that this would be further broad than strictly fire, correct?
That is correct, and the title has been changed to reflect that.
Thank you.
Councillor Rich.
Yeah, I'll be in support of that for sure. I think that anytime you can designate someone towards fire training, that you're going to improve the quality of the training to the firefighters in the community. And I think that whenever a firefighter is under a position of stress, that they're always going to revert back to their training. So what we're really talking about is increasing the safety of our volunteer firefighters by being able to provide them with better training and services.
Councillor Dave Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too support the concept. The question is, has this been incorporated into the impact of the overall levy? No. So what would be the impact? About 0.5%.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Without putting Phil on the spot, I heard him say that we are currently contracting out training that this person would be able to do. But so is this number a true number if we went back and removed all of the contracting out that this person could do from all the other budgets? Is that something that you have a ballpark number you can reach for, or is that something you'd have to study?
The number in front of you is a full-time position to fund all benefits and wages of the position, and it includes some allowance in it now for the expenditures we already see. So I forget the exact number, but there is annually we already spend money in that. That's reduced from the 68,000.
So I think to deal with this now, we've had some discussion on is the question is how many are in favor of leaving it in? In. So the next item then is an active transportation coordinator for community services for $8,000, right? Am I in the right spot? Yeah. Yep. Questions on this? Comments? Anybody objecting to leaving it in? Questions? Go ahead, Councilor.
Well, just Mr. Mayor, just picking up what our Deputy Mayor alluded to try and drive down the tax levy a little bit. It's $8,000, but is this something also could be taken from your tax stabilization reserve? I'm just wondering, is this a one-time? Are you addressed as you to the Director of Community Services? Do you see this being something that will be showing on a yearly basis as one-time cost? Dean, what are you thinking?
I suspect it will be ongoing, especially after the first year and they start the development of the plan and rolling out the plan. I think council will see the benefits of having this position widespread to sports tourism as well.
Those 8,000 could become something bigger in the future, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, yes.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Sherman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still not wholly convinced the position is necessary. To me, reading the cycling plan, the bike-friendly community plan, most of the implementation is cross-departmental. I mean, it comes up, parts of it are in police services, parts of it are in public works, parts of it are in various existing departments where we have all the capability today to implement those things. I mean, we don't need a lot of advice from anybody to implement the entire police services end of it. Public works is well trained to add that cycling infrastructure that we need. There may be some things in terms of outreach, but we already have internal admin staff working on things like website updates, and I mean we heard that, at least in the report it said that was happening immediately, like now. So we don't have an active transportation coordinator yet. It's moving forward. I think we can move forward a large part of that plan with existing staff, with existing expertise that we already employ. Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to be in favor of adding it in the 2018 budget. I want to see rollout happen over the course of 2018. If it looks like it's not happening in 2018, maybe we can revisit it in 2019 and see. But I think I'll need that year to be convinced that it can't be done internally. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Niemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see the benefits of this position, but I'm having a little bit of a hard time justifying it in my mind. But I could support it with a equal reduction in the Saugeen Rail Trail budget to cover the cost.
Councillor Neil Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I can go along the same road and cycle along it, but my thought would be that that we should be looking at a cycling group with a committee, and they should do some fundraising, and they should bring some money to the table and a partnership, and maybe we could offer this position at 50 cents on the dollar, and if that was formed. So I guess I'm supporting a delay of 1 year or say we could approve it during the 2018 year before June, and if this group gets organized and can raise some equal funds.
Councillor Grace.
Well, I would like to speak in favor of it. This is something that we're putting a lot of energy into. We are now in the Great Lakes Trail Organization. We have this big Grand Fondo event planned for next August with 1,500 participants. This I see as being something that's really an important piece of our tourism brand, and I think it would be $8,000 well spent.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I'm going to actually agree with the Deputy Mayor. This is a perfect example of what I think was referred to as scope creep or something, and that, somebody brought it to the table and then it took on a life of its own. Well, we've made staffing decisions in this department that, we've got some talent there. We've got resources there. I'd like to see what is possible with the resources we have. And perhaps, as the Deputy Mayor said, in a year you can look at what's been done and then keep going from there.
Do you want to speak to it, Jane?
Yeah, I think you'll notice, though, in the 2-year plan, there's a number of items in there that have been identified. Currently, our existing capacity of staff are unable to take on that role without the assistance of staff. So in order for those activities to come to fruition, someone needs to take ownership of those. Currently, we don't have that resource to do that. Our anticipating hope was to have someone to do that so they can at least start to roll out the plan for us.
Councillor Mike Wyatt.
If I could ask one follow-up question to you to Jane. Jane, with the multi-million-dollar program that's just been rolled out in the province of Ontario, through Cycle Ontario. They're old terms, but summer experience programs and Canada Works and all those grants are going to be rolled out soon for 2018. Opportunity. Very good at applying for grants. Sometimes we are. A program where you could see maybe it could be fundable. A grant program for one time?
We've just received a grant notification this week that we were reading, and that would this program would fall under that criteria. So we certainly will be applying for this to see if we can leverage some of that money.
Okay, for $8,000, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. The next item then is the final item actually for staff is the additional community services staff. And questions, comments? Do you want to speak to it? Yep. Go ahead, Jean.
Certainly. We've had some conversations in regards to it already today, but I can certainly add some additional conversations. This certainly hasn't been the first year that I've sat in front of you and asked for additional staff. We all know our population has increasing. Our visitor numbers are increasing. However, a full-time component has not increased in community services. I can tell you 3 weeks ago we sat down as a management team and in community services with the dilemma that we didn't have enough staff to open a facility for a day. Our staff has not attended training to ORFA, which is the key training component for facilities this year because we didn't have the staff to send that day to ensure that their shifts were covered. If we have one staff person sick, we are in a position. When we have two staff people that are sick, we are in a desperate position to even open facilities. We continue to get demands for outside, for extending our seasons for garbage collection. I received another complaint yesterday. Why don't we have garbage cans out still? We don't have the staff to pick up the garbage cans. We don't have the staff to even go and change some light bulbs, which we get requests from, as an example, Dr. Earl Medical Health Center. Again, our population continues to increase. However, our full-time component, facilities component, has not increased in a number of years. We are totally dependent on our summer students in the summertime, and many of them have limited supervision while working out on sites. That, in essence, is a safety issue. Our expectations for cleaning and maintenance seems to be increasing across all of our activities. We have many requests for last-minute requests that we attempt to get as quickly as we can, which leaves us dropping other projects, whether it's beach grooming, beach cleaning, parks, garbage collection. We've had special events in the community. We continue to assist with those. Although we may not have an exact number for some of the increases that we've done, those are all small items that continue to be, I'll say, dropped on community services. Full-time staff continue to do a tremendous amount of capital projects for us. I've heard from this council your lack of desire with some of the capital projects not being completed. In some cases, we simply don't have the staff. And at that point, we're having to bring in contractors to get them completed. We have increased in minor rentals in many of our rental facilities. Town hall events are increasing. We have housed for the last 2 summers a theater group. All these activities benefit the community, are important for the community. But what I'm trying to tell you today is that there's an impact to community services. The theater group at the town hall, tremendous success this summer. But I can tell you we had 2 staff in there every day ensuring that that facility was clean for the next show. That's relatively new to our agenda of items that we do. Our rinks, we have increased our daytime ice as requested by council, and again, that's pulled staff in to ensure that they're here for those bookings. As I indicated before, the Dr. Earl Medical Health Clinic is now fully full, and that's an impact to our operations too. Our turf, we cut 63 hectares of grass. Our dog park, we've increased the number of times we cut the grass there, again, from demand and complaints. We received, particularly this summer with the tremendous amount of rain that we had, increase in grass cutting. Typically, it would start to slow down about mid-August. That continued well into October this year. I can go on and on and on about the work that we do and the added responsibilities that are on our desks. But at the end of the day, our staff complement has not increased tremendously. Feel those demands by the public and by council in many cases, calling us and asking for garbage to be cleaned. So I share that with you today as background information for the report.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Jane, could you just clarify for members of council that this isn't a full-time position? This is a you can finish off my sentence and when you anticipate them working?
Yeah, this position will not be a full-time position. This is a part-time position. Next year I may full-time position, but this year we're looking for a part-time position to help out in our hot demand areas. So that's from early spring until late fall to get us through that process.
Councilor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember when I arrived in town here back in 2001, I think our population was 12,000 or 12,500 people. I think the new census said we've gone to 14,000, and I think we're scheduled to go to 17,000, 18,000. I don't know whether I don't believe we've added a whole lot of adult, quote, seasonal staff to help supervise our younger students in the summertime. So I don't know whether we've added a whole pile, but we better continue. Our community is growing, and I guess, Jane, I had a couple questions, and one was, well, last year you came to this council table and asked for one full-time position, and council agreed to the half-time position. So I guess my question of you is, why are we moving away from one full-time equivalent to 2 6-month employees? That's my first question. And secondly, over the last 5 years, say, Jane, the number of buildings we've added, urinals, toilets, countertops, hectares of grass in the last 5 years. And again, we haven't had a lot of outside workers. We have inside with the new manager of parks and facilities, full-time employees. That community service thing has gone from 5 to 7 employees inside. But outside, we haven't added a lot. So what is in the last 5 years? Can you give me a number at all in terms of what we've added with urinals, installed washrooms to clean, floors to clean, and hectares of grass to cut? And how much have we? How much has that been increased?
Again, I come back to some of those.
I know. There's all those other things I've added.
Yeah. So we've added 2 new splash pads. We've added a full doctoral medical health clinic. We've added Captain Spence Trail. We've added a trail right now at Adelaide. We've added a more enhanced trail at Fairy Lake. I'm just rhyming this off the top of my head. We've added components to enhance washroom facilities, either at Chesley Street Washroom, fish cleaning station.
All in the last 5 years.
We now sweep
Right.
trails that we never did 5 years ago. Every Friday we're out sweeping trails. So all of those.
So we're kind of, growth is growth, and we're starting to pay the price a little bit for that growth that we're seeing in the community, and with not adding, I think what you're saying is I remember we added three staff at the waterfront last year, rakers, but what you're saying is this adult position for 6 months, and I still like an answer to the other question why we've moved away from the full time to 2 6-month people. But the 6-month person will be able to do a little better job supervising our students as well.
That's certainly what our intention is. The question, we're going from a full-time to a part-time. I guess my track record hasn't been the best in acquiring an additional full-time staff person, and we're desperate for extra staff right now, and we would certainly like to add to our complement to at least have a part-time staff person.
We are growing. Yeah.
Councillor Minaj.
I have 2 options, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. To change the model, cut the number in half to 20,000, give it to the Rail Trail Association and tell them to manage cutting the grass, maintaining the trails, and cleaning the washrooms. They're doing it anyway, so do it more where it's needed. And the other option would be to cut the number in half and hire 4 retirees for 1 position. Let the 4 retirees determine over the year, when the days are required and the work is required, how they would manage the work and how they would look after the students. Retirees matched with students would give a mentoring opportunity, and would give that, if they're the right people, would be able to nurture the growth of the students in those particular fields. So there's 2 other options you could think about other than adding a full-time part-time staff.
Okay, Councillor H.
And thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be supporting this recommendation for a couple of reasons. One, because later on when they ask for council requests, I'm going to ask to extend the ice time. We currently have had great success extending our ice time at the Plex from the 1st of April until the 23rd. And as someone that's involved in the hockey community, I've been bombarded by requests from spring hockey teams, power skating clinics that would love to see the Plex as an opportunity to be open from August 5th straight through until May 15th. So later on, when there's an opportunity, I'm gonna ask for that. And in order to be able to do that, we're going to need additional staffing. But I believe that the income that we bring in from that is going to offset the cost of additional staff, while still opening that staff member up for not just the 4 weeks, but an additional 5 months to help support community services.
Very briefly, I think we've had some pretty good discussion on this.
I really did misunderstand the report when I first saw it. I thought it was taking one person and adding to create a full-time job. So can I just confirm that the existing person or position that we created last year is still in the budget, still part of the mix, right? And with with the additions this year, that number probably creeps up to about $40,000. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I must apologize. I had it in my notes and completely skipped
Okay.
over at the beginning, but yes, it is.
And that person assisted tremendously, I believe, at the waterfront.
That person has assisted tremendously in all aspects, more of the grass cutting, because that was one of our hot spots this year, and they're now inside helping us with our Plex operations as we're completing capital projects.
Okay, so that was going to be my question. Was it part-time, like in terms of days of the week, or was it 6 months part-time that way? Because I was just curious how the overlap would fit, because if we need the assistance outside, let's say, in the spring as we open things up, and then after the students are gone, does that fit into this? You're not talking about just 2 people extra basically over the summer. It's creeping way out.
You're correct. It's creeping right out, and all of our employees, we cross-train. So our employees aren't trained just to do one task. They're trained to do multiple tasks in order to give us that flexibility.
Okay. I guess I'm ready. Anybody, all in favor of leaving it in? Taking it out? It's in then. So now, go ahead.
In light of that, I'd like to make 2 other suggestions with regard to those things that in regard to all these things, environmental control, management, and council compensation review. I'd like to change them to be funded, but from tax stabilization to the tune of $20,000.
I would concur, and I think we can give direction to staff generally to come back with some other ideas about perhaps overall the budget as a result of the discussion. So now the next item on the agenda then is council requests, and the first one is to create a waterfront park and committee. So this is Councillor Minaj, so if you want to just describe a little bit for us. We've got the information sheet with us here, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be as quick as possible here. So we've pushed around the idea for some time now that the waterfront itself could be considered a park, and that it would take some legislation to make it that way. And then the thought was that the waterfront is having difficulty advancing good ideas. We like that term. And they have many, and they had many, and they had a waterfront master plan that addressed a number of progressive ideas. So if we modeled a new committee, the waterfront park and a waterfront committee, not an ad hoc committee, but a new committee that was similar in composition and thinking as the rail trail or the airport or another, the Coast Guard Auxiliary, whatever other committee has access to money and funding and is able to make governmental decisions on budget items, runs a budget. And so to do that, where would they get their money from? So what's not listed here in detail, the funding sources, well, I did, I guess. So businesses that are here because of the waterfront are restaurants, tourist camps, for example. So if we were to take a small percentage of the profit made by the tourist camps and say that money is directed to this committee to manage, they could manage that money to make improvements along the waterfront. So there's 2 tourist camps that we have, one in Southampton and one in Port Elgin. So there's 2 good chunks of waterfront that could benefit from a committee having access to funds. So if we could agree to a diversion of 1%, 3%, or 5% of the profits made from the tourist camps into this committee, form this committee, declare the waterfront a park, we would give them the wherewithal and some funding needs that they could build over a few years and take on some projects and finance them outside of what we're able to do as a council and as a municipal organization. Albeit we would, it would be like the police commission. They do things. Originally I thought this could be a commission, and Linda quickly advised that would be an act of Ontario to make it a Saugeen Shores Parks Commission like Niagara Falls. So this is my brainstorm here, looking for an opportunity to advance some things that we can't seem to get done.
Comments? Councilor Rich.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, so that would eliminate the Waterfront Committee?
We would trade the current committee. It could start in 2019. This committee can continue and put the groundwork together to move from the existing to the new. And starting for 2019, advertisements could go out for a waterfront committee, not an ad hoc committee, a waterfront committee that would be able to do. I mean, I'm sure that the CAO and Director of Community Services and others have complementary ideas that could make this work, or they could refute it and say, no, it's not what we need. But at least I thought that it would be moving us in a positive direction, and I feel like we're treading water at the moment.
Go ahead.
I mean, the key question for today's meeting is the financial question, right? And what you're proposing here, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that we take municipal revenues wherever they come from, and we hive them off and we give them to a third party to administer. Whoever that third party is. I mean, the question of committees and stuff is for another day, I guess. I mean, I have some concerns with that, I guess, in that. My view, I guess, is that public revenues generated by public assets should be spent by the public's representatives, and so I guess the question of, I feel like you by separating us from the expenditure of those funds, you reduce the level of accountability for how they're spent. I feel like council, if there are things that council ought to be moving forward on the waterfront, or that ought to be moved forward, council could just as easily use those revenues and move them forward. As a separate commission or committee. So that's where my hang-up is, or my concern, I suppose. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and I agree with you. First of all, I would not be willing to just hive off a bunch of money and give it to them without even if we had the committee. I think we need a budget and what they were going to do with it. I think we end up then duplicating what our community services are doing, and we lose that accountability that Luke talks about directly to your council members. So I don't know what this committee, other than, and the other thing, I don't know anybody out there that's looking for more administration or another level of government or another level of bureaucracy to complicate things. The waterfront is one of the assets that I know as councillors, and each of you will probably agree that we get the most, one of the most things we get the most input to. And if we put another level of bureaucracy or committee in there, not directly responsible to council, I think it's going to be, I think you're just going to make it more confusing. And there's going to be fingers pointing, no, it's the waterfront committee, no, it's council, no, it's the ad hoc committee on the waterfront committee. I think you're right, the expenditures should be approved here at this table. And we can get that input from our waterfront ad hoc committee.
So explain to me how the Rail Trail Association exists and why we haven't disbanded the Rail Trail Association and turned it over to community services to look after.
That isn't what this proposal is about, but I mean, we can have that discussion if you want at another time. This proposal is about a waterfront committee, and I don't think I don't think it's unfair to confuse the two. If you want to get rid of the Rail Trail Committee, then by all means make that motion and we can deal with the next.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking for is a waterfront committee that operates in a similar fashion as the rail trail. You said it would create another level of bureaucracy. We allow the rail trail to make decisions. We allow the rail trail to have a budget. We give them money to do their work. And all I'm asking is that we do the same model for the waterfront.
Okay. So the question, Councillor Grace.
Thank you. Just to respond to Councillor Minaj, I guess the difference for me from what you're envisioning for the waterfront committee and what the rail trail does is, I can tell you from being on the rail trail for now my second appointment to that board, is that the members of the board are most of them, and just a handful really, spend hours. Some of them are every single day on the trail working, 6 to 8 hours to maintain that trail. And I don't see committee members out there, I don't know what they'd be doing, like raking the beaches or maybe weeding, I don't know, something that would be useful, I suppose. But one of the great values of the rail trail is its maintenance and construction of the trail and what that saves us as a town from having to pay.
Thank you. Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind us all, the rail trail is not a committee of council.
That's right.
It's totally separate. Yes, we have some members there, but it's not a committee of council. And, just as a suggestion, I passed along Luke's copy of the ad hoc environmental committee that we struck many years ago, and we tasked that group with coming up with 10 initiatives. There's nothing to say that the current waterfront committee couldn't do the same thing. And then, there's some bona fide actions that then come to council to go forward. But I don't see the need for this right now.
Okay, I think we've had some pretty good discussion. I think we'll call the vote on it. All in favor of this recommendation? Opposed? That's defeated then. So the next item then is the beach maintenance. There's a request to increase beach maintenance, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Mike, if you want to be very brief on it, just go over it.
I'm not going to read it. I spoke to it last Monday night, and really it basically is a couple petitions on file talking about surf breaking and tilling from 35 Saugeen Beach Road north to Heights Grove north, and again from George Street up to Golders Grove Beach. And it's 2 hours, two surf breaks, 2 cultivates per year, road tillings per year. Dave, Councilor Matt, and I have met with many residents down there on many occasions. And that's a request that's come forth from the residents in that area and tourists, saying let's step up the maintenance of those 2 areas. So my motion's here, and thank you, Councillor Matt, for seconding it, and I'd appreciate Council's consideration.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will be supporting it, obviously. And just furthermore, it appears as though there is allowance in the budget already to compensate for additional surf raking, so it's covered.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I guess just so I'm clear, it may be in the resolution, but I just can't quite find it. Can I get verification from the administration that $3,000 is the number required to carry that out? Is that $3,000 the right number from your point of view?
Yes, that will certainly cover that area.
Okay. Any further comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we have... Sorry, Councillor Rich?
Is it possible to make an additional council request at this time? Yeah. Do I have to do that in writing, or...
You can clearly describe it well, and so everybody understands it, we can make a decision?
Sure. So I would like to make a request that we extend ice time at the Plex until May 15th and start it on August 5th in this coming 2018 year. I think that there's demand for the ice time. I think that there's... I've been contacted by groups that would like to run camps and use our facilities. I think we invested the money in these facilities initially so that they could be used. I think that any time that we can extend and try and extend that program is good for our community.
Okay, I want to be clear again. Say the dates again, John. So we leave it in until May the 15th?
Leave it until May 15th, 2018. Okay. Put it back in on August 5th, 2018.
Okay. Do you want to speak to that, Jane?
Yeah, if I can just make one comment about that. The approval of the additional staff person helps us, but as I said before, it takes 3 full-time staff people to run a facility. So I'm up 1 person, but now I'm down 2. If we extend the ice, I think certainly it is valuable to the community, and there is a need there. But at this point, I just don't have the resources to expand that.
Okay. You want to speak to this particular issue? Go ahead, Vice Deputy Reaver.
I would be curious to know too what the additional operational cost would be, because it's getting warmer then, so certainly keeping the building cool. But then beyond that, if there would be any impact on previous renters who've used the building at that time. I'm also a little bit hesitant at the moment, because if the Coliseum ends up, with something going on, it's there might be a need for indoor space depending on the timing. But I think in a vacuum we need additional financial information to determine if this makes sense.
Okay, and I think if you'll agree, John, that we can ask staff to come back with a report, and we can probably decide it before the final budget approval. Is that fine?
Sounds great.
Yeah, we won't lose it. Okay. So, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I have another request. A request that will likely result in some sort of report back, and my Councillor Rich raised it, and I'd like to hear more about it. Is this question of contracting services, particularly contracting cutting grass across the corporation, both public works and community services, and also the concept of contracting property management. We've heard now from the Director of Community Services that we have full-time people running around replacing light bulbs in buildings we're maintaining. There are companies that maintain buildings that you can employ to look after things like that. And so I would like to have, I'm not suggesting, I recognize staff has got a lot going on, and I'm not suggesting that needs to be delivered. If it can't be delivered in the budget window, that's acceptable to me, but I wonder if staff could report back on at some point on that, and if coming up with a decent report on it requires some expenditure of money or resources, then we could look at that in the budget, and so it could be resourced. I just feel like it kind of got pushed aside when the council raised it, and I don't feel like we've done our due diligence unless we look at that seriously, because it's becoming a significant expenditure, and it's only going to get worse. So,
yep. I think, and I've just looked at the CAO, and will come back with some options and consequently, a report. So that is their list. One other. Oh, sorry. Fees and charges. Yeah, I was just going to get to that. The next item then is fees and charges, and I think David is going to bring us up to date on it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is a follow-up. I mentioned this earlier in the day, if you can recollect back then. When we brought the fees and charges information to council, there were 3 areas you asked for some follow-up information on. So this is not in your package due to the timing of that request and here. So each of the department heads have a few slides on there, so they will present.
On now. I've provided you with I did share with you at that meeting some comparable pricing, but in fairness, I wanted to show that to you in a chart format so you can see. These are all camps within the Saugeen Shores area, and Saugeen Shores tourist camp is there as well. They provide seasonal rates, daily rates, weekly, monthly, and then some additional rates that we each have as well. So further to the background information, I've given you a slide that shows the Tourist Camp Reserve and the 4-year net. And it certainly fluctuates year after year, and the 2017 is proposed at this point. I know, Councillor Grace, we had given you some numbers previously. The 2017 budget has not been consolidated as of yet, and there's still about $130,000 still remaining to come out of that budget. Our existing Tourist Camp Reserve is at a negative right now of $42,000. However, annually we contribute $35,000 into that from the operating budget. I also wanted to share with you, just for your knowledge, and some of you may be aware of that there is a corporate policy for Harbour and Tourist Camp, and it's to ensure that the Tourist Camp and the Tourist Camp Reserve do not grow excessively, and each reserve will be capped at a maximum of $75,000. But that bylaw, I think, is about a 2007 vintage maybe, and we may want to take a look at that. I've also given you the 5-year capital forecast for tourist camps, appreciating the fact that this does somewhat fluctuate as we present it each year, but this gives you a caption of what we're looking at over the next 5 years. And an analysis of the tourist camp budget based on a 5% increase in the seasonal rate, a 1% reduction to the proposed tourist camp fees would equate to about $6,445 reduction in revenue. These are some of the annual fees that we're looking at in our 5-year forecast as well, to give you a bit of projection of what we'll be proposing in future years. And again, it's based on our capital budget, our 5-year capital budget. For the 2008 expenditures, these are a couple of items that we are incurring this year. There's certainly, as you heard, an impact to the minimum wages, which equates to about $8,000, $608, and there's going to be an increase to the utilities. So a combination of that's about $13,000. So really, in conclusion, where we came up with the 5% increase for the seasonal fees is obviously it's to assist with the future capital commitments. There's a continued contribution to financing a reserve, contribute towards the reduction of the overall tax levy. It offsets the added cost of increased minimum wage and utility expenses, and ensures that the tourist camps are comparable to the surrounding camp fees.
So, do you want to deal with them individually? I guess we might as well. Right? Yes. So, the proposal then was, I think, it was a 5% increase, and okay, I think, go ahead, Councillor Grace. If somebody wants to suggest something else, by all means, let's.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest a reduction. I've already spoken to the fact that I think we have a pattern of making a significant, above $500,000 a year profit on these camps, and if we were putting that profit back into significant capital investments, it's my understanding that last year we spent money to replace 3 roofs in the Southampton camp, and we spent $50,000. But I guess, when I go to the camps, our bathrooms, look pretty subpar. And for the amount of profit that we're making, I think we should be spending more. I could support a 5% increase if there was more capital investment in those camps. And we have a loyal resident base in those camps, which I think is valuable. There are people who they and their families have been there for 45 years, maybe more. And as I said before, I think these residents add a lot to our community. They are, as I said, a stable, seasonal resident base. They add a lot to our economy as consumers. And so I would like to see either a commitment to spending more on our capital investments or a reduction of, I guess I would say 1%. So take it back to 4%. Thank you.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I agree with Councillor Grace. I want the 5%. I understand why we need the 5%, but I also know the state of some of the facilities. I know our staff works hard on them, but they're dated. They need to be upgraded. If the people are paying, we have to provide them with ample facilities. So if we could look at a costing to improve the washroom facilities, the shower facilities, and it could fall within that 5%, that would be great if staff could come back to us.
Okay, I think, do you have anything in the capital budget that we can consider? You don't need to just say yes or no. Oh, okay, you did? Okay, yeah. So I guess this is just suggestion, excuse me, I'm tripping over my tongue. Suggestion was 4%, Cheryl? And you fine with that? Is it? Yes? Oh.
sorry, and Jane went through her presentation fairly quickly. In 2018, there was $65,000 for fence replacement and completion of the washroom construction.
Yeah, I think that's probably the the one in the Port Elgin.
Yeah, that is. Council approved $100,000 last year to build a new facility next to the Ball Diamonds, which includes shower. $100,000 is not going to cover it. We're coming back in 2018 to ask for additional funds to finish that. That'll be an entire new facility. That's the key washroom facility at the Port Elgin Main Beach, which is shared with the Ball Diamonds. That will be a new facility, hopefully after budget's been approved.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep investing in the facilities, but it's important also to remember that we are a public institution in competition with a whole bunch of private businesses. And if you look at the list, we're pretty low compared to them. We're setting a price, and we're competing hard against them, and we oughtn't be. Our price should continue to escalate faster than theirs, so that we don't put too much downward pressure on the private sector, and their expenses are going to increase a lot faster than ours. We're talking, we have a pretty small hit from the minimum wage. They got a lot more minimum wage employees in the private sector places. They're going to take their employee budgets alone are going to take a 20% hit this year. We cannot set low prices in this sector. We have to be on the high end of this sector. Our prices should be higher, frankly, than they are, so that we aren't over competing with them. So I think we should take the 5%. I don't have any trouble if we come back in the capital budget and we want to price out some investments that we want to make in washroom improvements or whatever. That's important. In order to keep our usage high, we're going to have to make those investments. But let's not cut this thing from where it is. Let's take the 5%. Let's escalate our rates as fast as the private sector is going to have to escalate their rates. They're probably going to have to go up more this year because they're going to take a huge haircut. So we're going to have to, I think we need to keep, particularly this year, take that 5% so that we are as uncompetitive as we can be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I think we had a suggestion at 4% here, and was there anybody to second it? Well, I think we're... Go ahead.
I guess I would be okay with 5% as long as I can have assurance from staff that we will make a commitment to trying to reasonably make better capital investments in the camp. To at least have our bathrooms spruced up to look nice.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe I heard the director say there was $100,000 in the 17 capital budget. Our proposed capital budget for 18 includes $65,000, so that we're looking at $165,000 capital investment in the next year, subject to council's approval in December.
Councillor Mike Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Precisely my point to you, to the CAO, that the $165K will be invested in a washroom. I think the report was an excellent report, Jane. I also agree wholeheartedly with what our deputy mayor has said, and I spoke to this 5% at the last meeting, thinking that the 5% is not unfair. And you take a look at the numbers, for the other campgrounds in the area, with the $2 per hour minimum wage increase, you can almost be guaranteed their rates are going to be going up. And I agree to Deputy Mayor Charbonneau that it's important that we are not competitive where we're competing with local enterprise. So we need to be in my view, keeping it at the 5% and reinvesting wherever we can in our campgrounds for sure.
So I guess then, just to clarify, I guess I'll ask the question on the 5%. If there's anybody opposed to it, then we'll go back and find out what the new, unless you want to make another suggestion. Are you fine with that, Cheryl? Okay, who's all in favor of the 5% increase? Opposed? That's carried. So the next item then, waste management.
So the waste management levy, we were asked to come back and describe it a bit better. We implemented this in 2015 with a request to start at the $55 per property, but the direction came back from council to start at $27.53, cut it in half. So that's where we started, and every year we've been increasing it by 25% to have it fully implemented over 4 years. So you'll see in 2015 the levy brought us 218,000, and in 2018 it'll bring 440,000. The cost per house will be $55 this year. The revenue is $1.4 million. The expenses are also $1.4 million. The difference between the revenue and the expenses between 2017 and 2018 are the amount that went into the reserve. So in 2015, 2016, there weren't monies put into the reserve, whereas in 2017, 200,000 approximately went in, and this year 300,000 will go in. Those numbers are on track with the report that Stu Doyle had presented back in 2015. He actually has a line that says, proposals to levy $55 per lot in Saugeen Shores and raise $375,000 in revenue to provide landfill expansion, offset capital and operating expenses. To raise this amount of revenue with bag tags, it's estimated that each bag would need to be sold for $5.50. So that's the intention of the levy, is to keep the bag tags at a price that we believe people will continue to buy them. The levy as well, there is a benefit to every landowner, not just those that are here 12 months of the year. So when you have a high seasonal population that would only be paying for bag tags in the summer, we still have to pay to operate the landfill for the remaining 6 months of the year. That piece of the bag tag revenue is lost if you take in 1/3 of that revenue for half the year. The other part was that if you own a vacant land and you're going to develop it, if you're not paying the levy on it, what happens to your material when you decide to demolish, and you're going to take down all the stuff that's there. So there are pieces of property that pay very little in tax. Like we do have some that pay $76 a year in tax because they're not developed properties. If there's no levy on that property, then there's a service that's not being reconciled, and that was the intention of the levy. So the 2018 budget has a zero impact to the tax levy. It puts the $375,000 into the expansion, landfill expansion reserve as originally planned, and all 3 divisions become user pay.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Any questions on it? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So was there an analysis made? I heard you say where people have vacant lands that they may develop in the future, and certainly that logic makes sense to me, because those persons' land is more valuable to future purchasers because of the fact that there's a landfill in the area. But when you're talking about A1 agricultural land that is owned, you might have one individual that owns 10, 12, 15 or more properties. It's clearly unfair to me that that person has to pay the levy of $55 on each one of those properties, when many of those properties do not have and will not have buildings erected on them because of their zoning. You just can't build a house in the middle of a cornfield. So I suggested that those lands that are clearly agricultural lands that do not have the benefit of the landfill, that they should be levied at a rate commensurate with their tax rate, which is around 25% of the mill rate, or somehow, some other way, limit those persons' liability under this levy, to say that a person only needs to pay for 2 or perhaps 3 levies and not 10 or 12, as the case may be. So was there any consideration given to that, or was that just dismissed summarily?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was originally looked at, and I know the impact was very small on the cost change. What I don't know is how many pieces of property fall under that definition. Is it 1 or is it 100 farms that would be affected? So I I think I need more information on that before I can answer the impact of that.
Do you want to speak to it? No, I think one of the... I don't disagree with your thought process, David, at all. But I think it's pretty complicated to get to there right now because there'll be some of those properties that will be zoned for that, specifically where you've severed a surplus farmhouse. Often, then the requirement is to basically freeze the remaining parcel so that you can't build it. I don't think there would be a whole lot of them, but. I think we're going to review the whole plan next year. Maybe would be if you want to persist, I think you could probably find that stuff out this year. I don't think it's a big number, though. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
I would suggest that an easy way to implement it would be to have those persons that are in that position that maybe own a number of properties that are strictly agricultural and do not have any buildings on them, that they may pay the levy up front and come in and get a rebate. That we set up a program where if a person can prove that the land is strictly agricultural, then they can get rebated that $55 on those properties, and that would make it wholly fair for the agricultural community who contribute a great deal to our economy, and they do so in a way that we just drive by and don't notice, but they contribute a lot, and it's unfairly burdens them.
Okay, I think there's a couple other comments. And Deputy Mayor Sherman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a bona fide member of the agricultural community, let me say that it's wrong to say that A1 agricultural land that's vacant does not benefit by the presence of the landfill site. These are businesses that make use of the landfill site. They produce garbage and they throw it away. Some more than others, but they do. And so I think that their benefit is equal to, and perhaps probably equal to, at least one home, an agricultural business. Certainly my own agricultural business is equal to much more than one home. And I certainly ought to be paying that rate on those vacant lands that I farm. And I think that other businesses, they are businesses, and that make use of the landfill site. So I would say they should pay the levy, and just like any other business or homeowner would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
And just going back to when all of this was initially discussed, we did have rather lengthy discussions along the same line of, should everybody pay? Should it be, a little bit here, a lot here, and whatever? And ultimately, to me, at that time, it always came out to the value of the landfill over a long period of time. And most of this fund, based on what Amanda said, and what I remember, is most of the revenue generated from this is going into a reserve related to the future of the landfill. If we were in a position where all of a sudden we had to acquire a new landfill, we would all be stunned at the price tag on that. So this is very, in my mind, very good planning. And as an owner of vacant land, I've anteed up the fee over the last couple of years, and I think if we started to make it so that certain people paid and other property owners didn't, we'd start to get a lot of requests from people who are only here for a period of time, who have a vacant lot, don't intend to do anything with it for years, and it just made sense. It was the first time we'd done anything across the board, and it made sense, and it still makes sense to me. Thank you.
If, we've got a range of things there, and I'll go back to the idea that we're going to do a waste master plan next year, and perhaps if we can wait till then and maybe look at it then, Dave, because there'll be some, whatever the consequences are, financial and other, there's other issues around it, and then David just pointed out to me, commercial properties don't get pickup, but they also use the landfill site, so it's, I think there's more to it than that, and I was really looking to get a solution there, trying to get it. But if you're fine with it, we'll do that master plan next year and just raise it then. We can deal with it.
I can agree to that.
Okay, thanks.
And I agree that there is some other unfair areas. You say where a person owns an apartment building that has maybe 55 apartments and they pay once as well. So it goes both ways. Yeah. And I think that we should do a master plan that incorporates all of these things.
Thank you. So then I guess I'll go to the question, which was, originally proposed of the $25 increase in the general levy for waste, all of 25%, sorry. Late in the day. We've had some good discussion. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of that? Anybody opposed? That's it. We have one more to deal with.
The other night was a question in regards to ice fees, ice rates, and morning rates. Request that it be they pay the same as during school rate, which is $40.19. So the impact of the budget is. Now, I believe that's what I heard you request at council the other night. Sorry. I also wanted to give you the overall impact that the usage of GC Houston has at the school in the mornings, and give or take, it's about $1,000.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're talking about the high school and the public schools that use it. What I had asked for was that we take the high school rates and drop them to the $40 straight across the board. So it could, because it was $44 and then $96 depending on if they had a game. But what I was wondering, if with GC Houston, because it's the public school and it has such a unique program that gets so many kids out, if we could drop it to either $25, or if council would approve it, if we could find this somewhere for the minimal amount it is, that make their program $0. This comes from the kids. It's the school boards don't pay for any of this. So if we can make this active, get the kids out, get them active, we're only benefiting our community, if that's possible. Thank you.
So I guess that's a little different than what's proposed here. Do you want to, in an effort to get it done, why don't we have that clarified? Why don't you clarify that request with Jane, and we'll deal with it at the next budget along with John's request? Is that fine? Okay, so that we all know what the financial impact will be. I was suggesting that we deal with the whole issue around, okay, instead of just leave that, and we'll deal with the 300 included in that. So, okay. Complicates it. We have our fees and charges by like coming next meeting. But I wish we can just break it out. I mean, it's not. I'm not too sure what the request was. That's the trouble. I think what we can do, let's deal with this one right now, the one that Jane has. Can everybody agree this is pretty minor? We can all agree with this one, and we'll clarify your request with the other ones. And like, I don't think we'll bring it back. Yeah, we can do it next week at the fees and charges bylaw. Sure. How's that? Just make sure you get to the information to Jane soon enough so she can make put type of a report together that we know the. It's okay.
So if I could clarify it, it's the high school after school rate to the $40 and GC to $0, if possible, if we can find some way to accommodate that.
Okay. Hey, is that clear then, Jane? Can you? Okay. So we'll try and deal with that at the next regular committee of the whole or council meeting so that we can finalize our fees and charges bylaw. So that is the last, right?
I can't stop smiling. Oh, I lost the over or the under, unless I filibuster for 12 minutes. So I was born in next steps. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and members of council, and to our staff for all of their hard work at informing the budget. Our next steps, as articulated before, we will make the changes. We've heard a variety of things, actually not many changes, but some suggestions and lots of requests for information and action in 2018, and we'll build those into our work plan. We do have a capital budget meeting scheduled for December the 5th. And that starts at 9 o'clock. And then in January, if necessary, we'll bring the consolidated operating and capital budget review, capital budget back for our final approval.
Okay, thank you, David. And I'm not going to add to that because I'm sure we all want to get out of here. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, in favor, we're adjourned. Thank you, staff, for your patience today.